The unexplained fear Mark was a 12-year-old boy living in a small suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. Every morning, Mark had to take the bus to school. But there was one strange thing. He was terrified of taking the bus. It wasn't the usual fear that other kids might experience. Mark's fear stemmed from an intense anxiety that he couldn't explain. When the bus pulled up in front of his house, his heart would race, and his palms would sweat every time he stepped onto the bus. It felt as if something strange, something cold and unexplainable, was watching him from somewhere inside the bus. A strange morning. One morning, as Mark was waiting for the bus like usual, he noticed something odd. The bus he was supposed to take didn't look like the others. The color of the bus had suddenly darkened, almost to black, unlike the usual bright yellow buses. The doors opened, and Mark felt as though someone was waiting for him to step inside. But he couldn't see their face. The daily anxiety Mark stepped onto the bus with fear building in his chest. However, today, something felt different. He noticed the air inside the bus was thicker and colder. Everything around him seemed quieter than usual. Mark's classmates were sitting, but no one spoke. He sat down and felt like he was surrounded by a heavy atmosphere. This bus felt like a moving coffin, and Mark started to feel as though he was trapped inside. The strange shape in the mirror looking out the window. Mark saw the familiar sights of his neighborhood passing by. But then, something strange happened. He saw a shadowy figure reflected in the window, a person standing outside the bus. Mark turned around and realized there was no one standing there. But when he looked back out the window, the figure was still there, as if someone was watching him. He felt his heart race, as though someone was close, seeing into his soul. Whispers on the bus. Mark started to hear faint whispers around him. The sounds were like soft voices, indistinct, as though someone was talking from somewhere inside the bus. But when he looked around, no one was speaking. The whispers grew louder, and once again, Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He tried to stay calm, but the fear had already taken over his mind. Uncovering the bus's secret after several days of experiencing strange feelings on the bus, Mark decided to investigate the history of the bus. He secretly asked some of his classmates, and what they said terrified him. The story went that this bus had been involved in a horrific accident, where a boy named Peter had disappeared during a ride many years ago. Since then, there had been stories about this bus, that it carried the spirits of the lost children. Peter's spirit. Mark found information about the accident in the school library. One evening, Mark went there to search for old records. He discovered that this bus was involved in a series of strange disappearances in the area. The missing children were never found, but many people believed their spirits still haunted this bus. Mark realized that his fear might not just be irrational. Facing the spirit determined to confront his fear. Mark decided to face the bus one late afternoon. He waited at the bus stop, and the black bus approached. The doors opened, and this time, Mark didn't feel fear. He stepped onto the bus, and as soon as he entered, everything became hazy. He felt an eerie presence around him, and then a voice echoed in his head. "Thank you for remembering me." A fuzzy feeling. Mark stepped onto the bus and immediately felt a change. The air inside the bus seemed thicker, colder than before. He looked around and saw that the other students were sitting quietly. No one looked at each other. No one spoke. The bus doors closed, and the vehicle started moving. But strangely, the route was different from usual. The streets became quieter and foggier, the streetlights dimming. It felt like this bus was drifting into another world. The strange voice, suddenly, Mark heard a voice coming from behind. It was the voice of a boy, faint but clear. "Don't be afraid. I just want to help." Mark turned around, but saw no one. The bus remained silent, only the sound of the tires rolling on the road. Yet, that voice echoed in his head. He felt an overwhelming fear, but part of him wanted to uncover the truth behind that voice. Distorted reality. The bus kept moving down unfamiliar streets that Mark had never seen. The houses along the road slowly became blurry, then vanished into the air. When he looked out the window, Mark saw that they were traveling through a different realm, where time seemed to stop. The strange feeling intensified when Mark saw the silhouette of a child standing at the front of the bus, with no clear face, just a shadowy figure. Peter's appearance. Mark couldn't take it any longer. He stood up, walked to the front, and found where the child was standing. At that moment, the shadowy figure turned around, and the boy appeared clearly. "I'm Peter." The boy's voice rang out gently. "I disappeared on this bus many years ago, and now I need help." Mark was shocked, unable to believe what was happening, but he could feel the pain and unease in Peter's voice. The horrible story. Peter explained that, many years ago, a similar bus had picked him and other children up. However, during one trip, the bus encountered a strange accident and fell into another realm. The spirits of the children on the bus became trapped, unable to escape. According to Peter, this bus was the only way to free them. But in order to do that, Mark would have to help Peter complete a release ritual. The release ritual. Mark couldn't refuse Peter's request. He knew that only by helping Peter and the other children's spirits could he escape from the bus. Peter guided Mark on how to perform the ritual. However, as Mark began the ritual, the bus suddenly lurched violently. A powerful force pulled him inside, and the screams of the spirits began to echo. The force from the bus. Mark felt a powerful force coming from the bus as he performed the ritual. Everything around him started to move, and the bus shook violently. The screams of the spirits around him made the air heavy. Mark could feel the threat of the trapped spirits. He knew he had to finish the ritual quickly, or the bus would pull him into another world, where those spirits would trap him forever. The final release. Mark finally completed the last steps of the ritual. As he placed his hand on the black cloth and recited the final incantation, a bright white light erupted in the bus. The spirits around him started to slowly fade away, and the bus began to return to normal. Peter smiled, but his eyes were filled with sadness. "Thank you for helping me, Mark," Peter said, then vanished. The bus was now back to being an ordinary bus, no longer the eerie black one. Life, after the ritual with the bus, now returned to normal. Mark felt a sense of relief, but a part of him still felt empty. In the following days, Mark no longer saw the eerie black bus, but the memories of Peter and the spirits that helped him still haunted him. He couldn't forget what had happened, and though he no longer feared the bus, a part of him knew that Peter's spirit would always be out there. The darkness returns even though Peter's spirit had been freed. Mark couldn't shake the sense of unease. One night, as he passed the bus stop where he used to stand, he saw the eerie black bus appear again. The doors opened, and Mark felt a cold gust of wind. A voice echoed in his head, this time from another spirit. Not Peter's. "Do you think you've freed us?" the voice said, full of anger. A new threat. Mark realized that freeing Peter was not the end. He had freed the spirit of one child, but not all the spirits had been saved. Other spirits were still trapped on that bus, and they wanted Mark to help them. He would have to continue this fight, not just to save the other spirits, but also to keep himself safe. Making the final decision, Mark had no choice but to face the other trapped spirits. He decided to return to the bus, to uncover what was still hidden inside, and free all the trapped souls. He knew this fight wouldn't be easy, but he couldn't let the innocent spirits remain trapped forever. The strange bus returns. Mark stood frozen when he saw the eerie black bus appear again. This time, the bus didn't stop as usual, but slowly drifted past, its faint light spilling from the windows, casting a strange shadow outside. Mark felt a powerful pull from the bus, as if it was calling him to step inside. He couldn't resist, but the fear inside him grew stronger. Stepping onto the bus, Mark couldn't resist. He stepped onto the bus helplessly. As the bus doors closed, the inside suddenly became eerily silent. There was no sound of students, no hum of the engine. Everything became still. The bus started moving again, but not on the familiar road. It was moving into a dark, distorted realm. The dark realm. Mark felt a powerful pull from the bus, but at the same time, a feeling of despair overwhelmed him. He looked around and saw shadowy figures, the children who had disappeared long ago, appearing as intangible spirits. They looked at him with sad, desperate eyes. Mark understood that he was not only facing this bus, but also the fate of these spirits, trapped forever. Facing the spirit. As the bus continued to move through the dark realm, Mark decided he could not continue like this. He stood up and faced the spirits who were staring at him. "I will set you free," Mark said, his voice full of determination, but a voice from behind him spoke. It was Peter's. "Don't do it. Mark, if you set us free, you'll be trapped forever." Mark felt his heart stop. He couldn't imagine the price he would have to pay. The price of freedom. Mark understood that freeing the spirits of the children would come at a heavy cost. But he couldn't let them remain trapped forever. With unwavering determination, Mark continued to perform the final ritual, pleading for strength from the other side. The spirits began to break apart and rise, but as Peter smiled one last time, the bus started to change. The final transformation. As the ritual completed, the black bus slowly faded into the space. Mark felt his body become weightless, and the bus was now just a pile of ashes. The spirits of the children had been freed, and Mark no longer felt the eerie presence. He turned back to look, but the bus was gone. Everything returned to peace. Mark stepped off the bus, feeling light, but he also knew that this journey would haunt him forever. Life after the release. The next morning, when Mark woke up, everything around him seemed to return to normal. He no longer saw the eerie black bus, and the fear inside him was gone. But the emptiness still remained, as if a part of him had changed forever. The spirits he had freed were no longer there. But Mark couldn't forget their sad faces and the screams in his head. Unanswered questions. Mark tried to go on with his life as usual, but occasionally, he still felt Peter's gaze, the spirits watching him from somewhere, in a realm Mark could not see. He realized that even though he had freed those spirits, the memories of them would never fade. Everything seemed to have ended. But in reality, the questions and fears still lingered in his mind. The black bus. An open door. One morning, as Mark walked down the familiar road, he suddenly saw a black bus waiting at the bus stop. His heart raced again, and he couldn't stop staring at the bus. But this time, the bus didn't move, and its doors didn't open as before. Mark realized that even though this journey had ended, the black bus would always be present somewhere, like an open door, waiting for the next person to step inside. It's not over. Mark turned around and walked away, unwilling to look back again. He knew that his life would never be the same, but he also understood that, no matter how hard he tried to forget, the black bus and the spirits would always be a part of his life. The battle would never truly end, and perhaps one day, Mark would have to face that bus again. The fear of the bus. Alex was an 11-year-old boy living in a small, remote town near Los Angeles. Every morning, he had to take the bus to school. But unlike the other kids, Alex had a strange fear of this bus. Every time the bus would pull up in front of his house, Alex would feel an uneasy sense of dread. He couldn't understand why, but it felt like something was wrong, as if there was something waiting for him on the bus. Even though he tried to convince himself that he was just imagining things, Alex could never shake the fear he felt when he saw the red bus. A strange morning, one morning, as Alex was waiting for the bus like usual, he saw it for the first time in an unusual color. The bus wasn't the usual bright yellow, but a strange bright red. When the doors opened, Alex felt a powerful pull from within the bus, as if someone was waiting for him to step inside. The pull from the bus. Alex felt an eerie sensation as the bus doors opened, but part of him wanted to step inside, as if the bus was calling to him. He could sense the presence of someone inside, even though he couldn't see their face. The fear and curiosity battled within him. The bus doors seemed to widen, as if waiting for him to step in. But Alex couldn't move. An unexplainable feeling. Alex stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the red bus. The doors slowly opened, but no one stepped out. Instead, a cold gust of wind swept by, and Alex felt as though there was an invisible invitation, as if the bus was calling him to step inside. This strange feeling gripped him, and though fear filled his heart, part of him felt curious, as though something awaited him inside. The bus doors opened wider. Alex couldn't resist this strange feeling. He took a step toward the bus, but then suddenly a voice echoed in his head. Step inside, Alex. This is your only chance." The voice was gentle but commanding, as if it came from deep within the bus. Alex turned around, but there was no one behind him. He couldn't comprehend what was happening, but his steps couldn't be stopped. stepping onto the bus unable to resist any longer. Alex stepped onto the red bus. As soon as his foot touched the ground, the doors slammed shut behind him, making him jump. The bus started moving, but instead of traveling through the familiar streets, it seemed to drift into another realm. The streetlights dimmed, replaced by a shadowy space filled with ghostly figures. Alex felt as though he had entered a different world, where time and space no longer worked as they should. The shadowy figures around him. Alex looked around and saw shadowy figures, everyone sitting motionless on the bus. The light inside the bus grew dimmer, and the figures slowly became more distinct. Each person had a lifeless expression. Their eyes seemed to look through Alex, not truly seeing him. He couldn't understand what was happening, and a chilling feeling overwhelmed him. The spirits of the missing children suddenly. A distinct figure appeared in front of Alex. It was a boy around his age, but his eyes were empty, devoid of any light. "I'm Noah," the boy said, his voice echoing in the cold air. "We are trapped on this bus, and now you're the only one who can help us get out." Alex's unease grew as he realized these spirits could be the missing children from long ago. The horrible story. Noah told Alex the story of an accident that happened many years ago. A red bus, similar to this one, had fallen into a deep pit in a desolate forest. And since then, the spirits of the children on the bus could never leave. They were trapped in another realm, a place they could never return from. And this bus was the only way to free them. However, to do so, Alex would have to perform a ritual he had never heard of before. Learning the ritual, Alex couldn't believe that he would have to face a supernatural ritual to free these spirits. Noah handed Alex an old book, its cover torn and worn with time. "This is the only way for us to leave," Noah said. "This ritual requires sacrifice and strength from within you." Alex felt like he had no other choice but to perform the ritual, even though he didn't fully understand what was in the book. Beginning the ritual. Alex stood in the bus, holding the book in his hands. Noah and the other spirits stood around him, forming a circle. He began reciting the incantations from the book, though each word felt like it caused a disturbance in the air. As Alex's voice echoed, the surroundings started to change, everything twisting and spinning. The spirits around him began to glow faintly, and Alex felt the tension, the mix of fear, in his heart. Tension peaks as Alex spoke the final incantation. A strong gust of wind suddenly blew through, causing the bus to shake violently. The doors opened again, and Alex felt the presence of a powerful force, not of the spirits he had freed. A horrifying screech came from deep within the bus. "You can't free us," a voice echoed. "You will be trapped forever." The dark soul Alex felt his body being pulled into another realm. Shadowy figures began to appear around him, their eyes full of anger and contempt. He could no longer see Noah or the other spirits. Instead, a dark soul appeared, with glowing red eyes, staring directly at Alex. "We will never be free." The voice echoed with hatred. "You cannot save us." The intense confrontation. In this moment of intense tension, Alex felt the power of the ritual in his hands. He couldn't let these spirits continue to suffer. "I will set you free," Alex growled, gripping the book tightly. He continued to recite the incantation, even though the dark soul's resistance made his body tremble. The light from the book began to radiate, stronger than ever, and the bus seemed to start fading away. The final liberation finally. As Alex recited the last line of the incantation, the bus began to fade into the space. The dark souls also started to disappear, leaving only the powerful light shining from the book. Alex felt his body being freed, and the bus was no longer there. He turned around to look one last time, but the red bus, along with the frightening figures, had vanished. Back to normal the next morning. When Alex woke up, everything around him seemed to have returned to normal. He no longer saw the red bus, and there was no sign of any spirits. But a strange feeling lingered. Alex realized that part of him had changed forever. The memories of the bus and the spirits he had freed remained in his mind, as if they would stay with him forever. Unanswered questions. Alex couldn't stop thinking about the red bus and the spirits he had encountered. Even though he had freed them, there was one question that remained unanswered in his mind. Why had the red bus appeared the moment he touched it? Why was he the only one who could help these spirits? It felt like something was still unresolved. The next strange event. A few days later, as Alex was walking home from school, he saw the red bus again. But this time, the bus didn't stop. It simply passed by him, and when Alex looked inside, he saw a shadowy figure standing by the window. A deep sigh echoed in his mind. Thank you for freeing us, but one remains trapped. The darkness returns. Alex felt a wave of anxiety rise within him as he heard those words. One remains trapped. He couldn't understand. Hadn't all the spirits been freed? Why was one still trapped? He decided he would find out more, and this time, he wouldn't let fear control him. He had to know the truth. The strange note in the book. Alex returned to the library, where he had found the book about the release ritual. He flipped through each page, searching for any information that might explain this situation. Finally, when he turned to a worn-out page, he found a note he hadn't noticed before. The last soul cannot be freed unless it finds forgiveness. Alex felt like a heavy blow to his chest. The unfreed soul. Alex understood that the last soul he hadn't freed was the one trapped in the very bus itself. But who was it? He decided to return to the red bus, to find this spirit and help them find forgiveness. Alex knew this would be a confrontation like no other, but he couldn't give up. Returning to the bus, Alex decided to return to where the red bus had last appeared, where he had seen a shadowy figure in the window. He stood at the bus stop, watching the red bus pull up in front of him. The doors opened once again, but this time, no one stepped out. Alex took a deep breath and stepped inside, the familiar feeling of fear overwhelming him again. The last spirit. As soon as Alex stepped onto the bus, he felt a cold gust of air surround him. He walked deeper inside, and a shadowy figure appeared in front of him. This was the last spirit, a boy with a face full of sadness and suffering. I'm Jason, the boy said. I've been trapped here for so long, and I need forgiveness. Alex looked into Jason's eyes, feeling the pain and despair. The final forgiveness. Alex understood that, to free Jason, he had to help him find forgiveness. Jason, you don't have to suffer anymore, Alex said, gripping the book tightly and reciting the final incantations. A powerful light erupted from the book, illuminating the entire space around them. Jason slowly began to fade away, But before he completely disappeared, he smiled one last time and whispered, "Thank you." The bus disappears as soon as Jason faded away. The bus started to disintegrate, the light from the book shining brightly, causing the surrounding space to gradually vanish. Alex looked back one last time, and the red bus was no longer there. He stood frozen, feeling like he had just completed a difficult task, but also carrying a deep sadness. He had freed all the spirits, but the cost was the inability to forget what had happened. Memories that never fade after everything ended. Alex moved on with his life, but he could never forget the spirits he had encountered, the strange feelings he had when stepping onto the red bus, and especially Jason. Those memories would haunt him forever, even though he had helped them. He couldn't understand why he was the only one able to free them. But part of him knew that the red bus would always be a part of his life. Life goes on. Alex lived on, like any other child. However, every time he saw a bus, he felt a strange sensation rise in his chest. He no longer saw the red bus, but he knew that this world wasn't just made of the usual things, but held secrets he could never explain. He had opened a new door, but sometimes that door would open again. A new chapter with a sad smile. Alex turned and walked away, leaving the red bus and the freed spirits behind. He knew that a new chapter of his life had begun, but a part of him understood that strange confrontations would never truly end. Perhaps, one day, the bus would appear again.